And hello once again, everybody. This is Ron Sparkman from the Humans to Mars Summit, and we're really excited. It's been an incredible day so far, and we're thrilled to bring on our next guest here in just a moment and talk to him just a little bit. But thank you once again to Vera Moyani for the incredible video she just shared with us. And so the next person that I'm going to bring on, this has been a pretty exciting week for me, and he's been in my top 10 to interview for a while now. So I'm glad we get to do this Q&A today about risk. So Babak Ferdowsi, welcome to the Humans to Mars Summit, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I see myself in the camera and I feel like I'm like my dad from the 1980s with his mustache, so it's still a little weird for me.
So I think what we're going to start out with is, we're talking about risk, and if we're going to talk about risk, how can we not talk about the failed Mars missions that have happened? Because the percentage ratio to successful to failed is quite a bit. And, you've got you definitely have some understanding of that. So let's talk a little bit about that to start.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about how we're built on the shoulders of giants kind of in the space industry, right? With the missions that have come before us. And I think you have to include the failed missions as part of that legacy, right? That those are also shoulders that we stand on. If we didn't learn from those, then where would we be today? So for me, example, I always turn back to the Mars program of the kind of the 90s and early 2000s, where we had a series of failures, and we're able to overcome that and to incorporate so much of that lesson learned into the upcoming, the missions that came after that, like Spirit and Opportunity, like Curiosity, Insight, Perseverance, that's going right now. And so I think like we have to be a student of that, and I'm just fascinated by those. I personally work in the area of failure and fault protection and understanding how spacecraft can fail. So obviously it's near and dear to my heart. But studying those missions gives us such a great insight into what we can do better. And I think of like the Mars Observer mission as one of the first failures of that string, and how little information they had to go off of what went wrong. Extraordinary folks who are working on these missions, trying to adapt kind of Earth orbiters into a Mars environment, which has been done in the case of as ISRO's Mars orbiting mission has demonstrated. But they tried to adapt this mission. They did all these activities. In that case, they turned to prepare their system for to charge the propulsion system. They turned their radio off because that was the way they had tested it. And they were worried that firing pyros might lose a little bit of the radio signal or cause it to drop out. So they turned the system off, and of course that is exactly when some major anomaly happened, and they didn't have the telemetry. And of course now we know, okay, you really have to design the system such that anytime you're doing these critical activities, you incorporate that telecommunications link to make sure that it's redundant if needed. I think about Curiosity and Perseverance, right? It's not just that we have the direct signal to Earth to multiple stations, right? So that means that you think about the geometry of that, how challenging that can be. You have to have two parts of Earth with deep space networks on it visible as they're landing on Mars. And in addition to that, you also have orbiters overhead capturing the UHF signal. So those lessons learned come, certainly cost something in terms of how much work we have to do to fix them. But on the other hand, right, that knowledge allows us to learn a lot more in the case of failure, and then to build off of that thing. So, and of course, for me, it's not just the failures like those missions. I know that we joke a lot about the metric to imperial conversions and things like that, but it's also the testing, right? Like, I'm on the NISAR mission now. We're entering our testing phase, and that's where we're able to fail a lot while we're testing, learn a ton, and then fix the system while we have it here on the ground before we start sending it into space.
And so, risk obviously is a big thing. Adam Steltzner was on yesterday talking about Curiosity and the right kind of crazy with the sky crane. So let's talk about that pitch in the office and the risk that took. This is going to be a thing. And then look at the beautiful result of that and what you all put together.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting one, because with the sky crane and so much of the entry, descent, and landing, there was a limited ability to test that on Earth, right? You can simulate a lot of it. You can test parts of it in kind of localized environments. There was still some pretty amazing testing that went on of the radar system, using jet planes and helicopters, testing of the parachutes. but none of those things can you really get quite in the Mars environment at the scale. That's basically, in order to test that interdescendant landing system, you basically have to build the whole thing, which is its own mission. And so that is, that's an extraordinarily challenging and time-consuming thing to do. So, at some level, you have to go on some risk there, right? You can try as much as you want to reduce the risk by the local testing and the maybe the simulations and things like that to get it there. But the first time we were able to demonstrate that successfully as a whole system was on Mars as we're landing, which is very scary for, I think, folks who are used to, oh, how do I test the whole system end to end, prove that it works exactly the way I want to before I, kind of commit this this mission. And for I think of Curiosity, and for me and for so many people on the mission, we were on that for years, some people for decades, or at least a decade, I should say, and that just knowing that much of your life has been put into something and kind of hinging it on that moment. It's terrifying, I guess, but also really exciting. And that's where I think you have to be willing to accept the risk a little bit in order to achieve the science goals of that mission, to demonstrate that technology for future missions, right? We're able to do that with Perseverance because we were able to do that with Curiosity. And so that is kind of that path forward, but you have to accept that there's no way to do that perfectly and to walk out the door and say like, oh, we've got this, we're done. I think everybody in mission control and on that project was keenly aware of the risk we were taking and the fact that this was not a done deal, which is why, of course, you saw us just kind of break down emotionally as it was successful, right? The crying and the joy and everything, because I think that was definitely not taken for granted.
And I mean, that's kind of how the world was introduced to you, Adam, and a few others. I think it's a beautiful moment that it was still something that everybody in the industry celebrates to see those. And I think it was something that you started to see a shift in who people were and what you saw in the background and just that excitement. It's just, there's so much love to that. I think it's incredible. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that later too. But why is it that we should take these risks, these intelligent risks, as you mentioned? And I mean, we're talking, it's the Humans to Mars Summit, right? This is going to be a risk. Elon, in our interview the other day, said some people are probably going to die. Some people died so far. We've got so many people that we celebrate now that were astronauts that sacrificed their lives for these amazing things. So what does it mean to propel humanity forward by these intelligent risks? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a great, I mean, one of the wonderful things about robots, of course, is not only can we answer so many of the science questions that are lingering, but also, I think it's important for us to use them as an opportunity to, reduce the risk for human missions, right? We know that with Curiosity, where we were able to carry the radiation assessment at Mars detector, and use that to basically evaluate the radiation that humans would be exposed to on the journey to Mars, and of course on the surface of Mars, and understand what that risk is. Right, you need the data to tell you, inform what risk you're taking. And you and I were talking earlier about Perseverance and Moxie, and carrying, or the instrument to basically to make oxygen on Mars, and what a critical aspect of putting humans on Mars that will be too. But the same thing is true, right, with the techniques and the failures of the missions before, right? Understanding what we need from the communications perspective for those missions, understanding what, dealing with the long lag times is. I was almost going to joke with you earlier, like we should do this in a flight like way where I pretend I'm on Mars, and every question you ask has a 4 to 20 minute delay before I get it. But those kinds of things, learning those lessons, learning how to operate in that environment, that gives us a better chance of being successful when it comes to humans eventually, right? We can take some smart risks with robots, where certainly, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm only barely able to scratch that feeling, but kind of preparing myself for landing night and thinking about what's the possibility of failure is, and what would that mean, and how much of my time and other people's friends' times was invested in that, in Curiosity. It's certainly a terrifying thing to think that you might lose those missions, but I think it's certainly I think all of us would feel more comfortable losing a robot than a human, and that's why we can kind of try that earlier with the uncrewed missions, prove out a lot of the technologies, demonstrate the instrumentation that we'll need, and kind of build towards that future where humans are there. And of course, in my my dream world, of course, the humans and robots are like side by side, and the robots are kind of like the pets of the new Martian kind of world.
And I mean, how many people have talked about the fact that once we get there, we've got to get to API and clean everything off and make sure it goes back to working again, because that's a wonderful thing.
I'm looking forward to this kind of like being Martian museums. Like I kind of have this hope that one day there'll be these little domes or whatever around them, and you can like visit their final resting places on Mars and be like, oh yeah, there was the first visitors.
Okay, so there is something that I do want to clear up real quick, that a lot of people talk about, that Curiosity sings happy birthday to itself every year, and people think that still happens every year. And you clarified that for me once I posted it, and I always like to be clear on that, but I think it's just something great to share with all the people here. If you've heard that, there's more to that story, and it's not quite what you thought it was. So can you give me the breakdown on that? Because you were the one that helped me out with that, and I'd like to clear that up.
Yeah, and I love that story, and I love that the team thought of a way for Curiosity to sing happy birthday to itself. So the SAM instrument, which is Sample Analysis of Mars, which has this, really does a huge amount of work in helping us understand the ancient Martian environment, and a lot of the findings that you see about the ancient river or lake that we were in the crater now. That stuff comes from out of that SAM instrument. But in order to get sample in there, it has a little piezo at the inlet so that it can vibrate and shake all the little dust and into, or I should say dust, but the regolith into the instrument. And so you can vibrate that little piezo kind of like a musical instrument. There's a good video, if you I think if you look it up, it's on YouTube still, of Sam playing like Beethoven to itself. And nice. You can see it like in the test bed here on Earth. And so I think the team's idea was, what if it played happy birthday to itself when it landed on Mars? It didn't quite go perfectly as planned. So I think it had a little bit of an issue while we were doing it on Mars. And so since then, we haven't really reattempted it, since it doesn't necessarily always add value to to the scientific part of the mission. But I think it was a great way of celebrating the mission. And of course, the team still celebrates the land anniversary, but we don't have to use the rover to do so.
And so what I'm going to do is, this actually circles back to the prior question. And a wonderful educator here, Christopher Mick, says, can Bob X speak to his thoughts on failure risk as related to future crewed missions to Mars that maybe the general public doesn't understand?
Yeah, I mean, with human missions, and I'm by no means a human expert, but I think a lot of there's certain things that as we learned from Curiosity with the radiation, and there's a sort of accepting that risk a little bit. We have the data now that can tell you what the statistical kind of likelihoods of radiation damage and things like that are to humans. So it's good to inform that risk, but we have to also, at some level, accept it as well as say, okay, here's what we can do to mitigate it, and here's what we're going to accept, because we just cannot practically solve all those problems, at least with today's technology. So it maybe also gives you some vision of what areas to invest in more technology, right? Can you build better radiation shielding, as an example, or lighter radiation shielding that would still work within the existing limitations of how much we can get off of the Earth in rockets. The other thing I always think about with human missions is you can kind of take different risk approaches, right? We talked a long time about different architectures about, if you want to put humans on Mars, how much do you put at Mars first logistically to make sure that it's all safe and working? And do you need to land a bunch of other things there, right? Like a giant size MOXIE that can create a whole infrastructure of oxygen. Do you need to have all your food already on the surface, so that you basically to ensure that once you have all those things, that only then do you send humans to make sure that they can safely travel. So I think that logistics, and then in many cases those missions would be, of course, robotic. Right? We have the opportunity to kind of reduce risk. On the other hand, right, we are in a that's a challenging thing. It takes a lot of time. Is there a sense of urgency? So you trade those things a little bit to figure out what is a acceptable risk. I think from my perspective, obviously, and everybody's, I think we want to show that we can get humans there safely and bring them home safely. And I think a lot of that is going to involve what do we as a nation and possibly as the world feel comfortable with as accepting risk. I know you're talking about your conversation with Elon earlier, and that of course there is a real risk that humans will die, but we also have to say, like, what do we feel okay with So from a technical perspective, though, I think the main things that always, I always think about how much of this is going to come down to how much can we tolerate on risk as we travel to Mars and getting down there, right? How do you build the infrastructure for, like the Made in Space program, right? How do you 3D print things if you need new parts en route? How do you deal with anomalies, right? Current ISS folks have to be able to triage um, uh, folks if they are injured for some reason and get them back to Earth. How would you do that now on a journey to Mars, right? Those are things that I think we're starting to prove out with human space flight, but there's obviously a lot of work to go. And so it's a really, I think it's an amazing area. I also think, just the impacts of once you can start doing stuff with folks in isolation that they really can't use the Earth as an option. What does that mean for folks on Earth? Can we start doing that for all of ourselves, right? Where resources aren't abundant, but can you put I don't know, like a robotic surgeon in a bunch of locations where people can go to for emergencies or things like that if you have to solve that problem for space. It's kind of cool.
And so the next one I want to talk about with risks is really kind of personal risks. For a lot of people, it can be difficult for them to be comfortable in in making certain style choices, or even things that are really personal to them. You're famous for being the Mohawk guy, but there's a lot of people that when they saw that, they said, you know what? Maybe I do have a place here. That's been a big piece of this week, is representation, from the Mars Needs Women panel to the emotional discussion where Leland Melvin and Charlie Bolden both talked about the fact that they didn't see people that looked like them. And when I posted that I was going to be doing this Q&A with you, there was more than a few people that popped up that said, when I saw him, I saw that there was a place for me as somebody that, one of my friends is, she's an engineer, and she's wonderful, and she's tatted up more than I am, and she's got the sides of her head are shaved, and she got a tattoo there. And she said, you know what, I can do this. So later in life, she went back, and now she's a Blue Origin engineer. And that's something that I don't know that you necessarily knew at the time would be something that would connect you with so many people. But you made us feel like there was a place for us, those of us that have piercings and tattoos and interesting, we change our hair color and do those things. So, I don't think that you were really planning on that, but what does it mean to you that, this personal thing to you that you've obviously kept through these years has meant to a lot of people and has allowed people to take more risks and say, this really is space for all?
No, I love, it makes me so happy. Obviously you're right in that I don't think I thought about that as the impact. So I think the two things that really, come to mind is, one, how fortunate I am to work with a bunch of people who did not judge me for doing that, or if they did, they certainly kept it to themselves. But also, right, my experience with JPL, by the time I had come on, right, I saw people with tattoos. The person I really consider my mentor, Tracy Nielsen, she has tattoos. So I already was able to see that, and I don't think it really crossed my mind at any point that it was unprofessional. And I had a team that was, on Curiosity, that was extremely supportive, still is, I think, very supportive of folks, right? And to the point where my boss was actually the person who sent out the poll prior to landing of what my hair should look like to the team, right? It was one of those like little doodle polls or whatever. And there were like a bunch of different options, including a reverse mohawk, which I'm very thankful they did not choose a reverse mohawk.
Okay, we now have to go on Twitter and be like, the next style choice for Bobak is going to be a reverse mohawk. So everybody go to Twitter and we're going to vote on this. I'm just kidding.
But I have to. I think in more than anything, I have to give credit to the folks around me. And while I totally appreciate that was not necessarily publicly visible, and I was sort of the one of the first people to be publicly kind of seen as someone sort of maybe pushing the envelope. I certainly was not. I never felt that way at JPL. I think I had such great folks around me, and so encouraging. And again, I don't want to make it out to be like some dream world or anything like that, but I really do feel like at the end of the day, I was, I was judged for the work that I was doing, and was reasonably good at that. And I think the hair was just like, oh, that's Bobak being Bobak, and nothing else. And I'm so glad that, I see more and more people like that at JPL and across industry. I think that's wonderful. Speaking of risk and the kind of the incredible things that we want to do in the space industry as a whole, like, you want everybody on board, right? I mean, when I think about it, like, these are challenges that take the best of all worlds, and you want folks who, you don't want to have like, oh, only half the population thinks they're welcome in space. when it comes to sending humans to Mars. You want 100% of the population kind of at your fingertips for the best people to solve those challenges. So I think representation does matter. I think you do want folks who maybe challenge the norms, right? I mean, talking about, I don't want to exaggerate, but like, that sky crane is such a challenging and incredible thing. And so many of the brilliant folks who came up with that. You want people who challenge convention at some level, right? With things like that. So I think if that's how you express yourself personally, that's also great. Not, you don't have to color your hair to be challenge convention, but I think you definitely want folks who represent more and more of the world as it really is.
And so there's this this campaign we've been doing on Twitter that is hashtag Why Persevere, and I think that's a big piece of this, is that all the failures that we have seen, and everything that's gone on, we still continue to move forward. In particular, it's something that NASA JPL and teams like yours continue to do, and we've seen issues with different, everything from, InSight has had problems with the mole, and they've figured out ways around that. And I know that we've done that over and over again. But really, I mean, this can be generally for you or even what your teams work on. How is it that you persevere, and why is it so important to you that we keep trying and we keep working? I know there's a lot of students on here that are going to hit failure so often, and you're going to learn. Do not think of failure as something that is a bad thing. We all fail over and over and over and over again. And there was that wonderful old commercial with Michael Jordan back in the day where he goes over all the failures that he went through. He said, "Because I fail, I win." Or that's might be paraphrasing. So again, so for you, why is it that you feel it's so important for us to persevere through this?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on two things that I really loved in that. One is, talking about InSight and I think of Kepler and all the different missions, right, that have had some sort of setback and still managed to do the most incredible things. And InSight is getting there now. And I think it's so motivational, right, to just see like how there's a robot hundreds of millions of miles away, that is having a problem, and we are going to figure out these creative solutions to solve it. Like, what a great way to kind of just see the world, right? Not to sort of let that challenge kind of overcome you. But the other thing that I think you hit on that I really love, and I think, I hinted at it earlier, but I feel like you said it so much better just now, is, we are going to encounter failures. And when I was talking earlier about kind of the shoulders of giants on which we stand kind of thing, I think we actually stand more on the shoulders of failures than often we do of the missions of success. Of course, doing a Curiosity successful allows us to do a Perseverance and things like that. But also all those lessons learned, right? The learning from Mars Observer, how to establish your communications, the learning from Mars Polar Lander about how to properly evaluate telemetry and make sure that, a single failure doesn't somehow catch the whole system into a failure. Even with Mars Climate Orbiter and the units and double checking and making sure all those things, those are really the kinds of things that you can take forward and say, here's how I do it better than the last time. And as much as you can be successful, right? Successful can lead to complacency where it's good enough always. Those failures are what really challenge you to move forward and be better. And so, Michael Jordan saying, my failures are what kind of lead to my victories. I think that's 100% true. I think that, if you don't learn from those failures, or if you don't take those opportunities to learn, you're missing out on the biggest way to grow, in my mind, and to keep moving forward. And this, right, to why persevere in that sense. It's really about taking those things and going forward on them.
And Twitter is very excited about your mustache, and so I think it's a great question to ask.
I'm so sorry.
So somebody in particular has pointed out that it reminds them of Dr. Robotnik from Sonic. So what's it like to chase the fastest, the fastest tiny little rodent across the world? So we got just one or two more questions here before we wrap up. Let's see. We've got Marissa. It says, are we set to launch humans on Mars with the rocket propulsion technology only, or are we currently researching into more modern technologies as well? I'm not sure if that's an area of expertise for you or not, but I thought I'd pick your brain on that one because it's a deep one.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, so for I think we are obviously getting off Earth is sort of, we're still right now in the conventional chemical rocket phase, and that, and of course we're still making a lot of innovations as SpaceX and Blue Origin are showing in that area, so getting it more reliable and safer, and lowering the cost there, which is amazing. I think in terms of traveling through the space, there were folks looking at a solar ion propulsion for human missions to Mars as a way of shortening the transit time between Earth and Mars. Right now, like with Perseverance, we actually, most of the energy is coming from the rocket, and we're just altering the trajectory slightly. Well, so most of the energy is really coming from the Earth's orbit, but the rocket pushes off Earth orbit, and then we basically are flying around in space, just kind of correcting our trajectory, right? If you think of an arrow, it's like shooting an arrow, all the energy kind of comes up front. So, but with ion propulsion, right, you could thrust the whole way there and then turn around and start braking, and that would get you there potentially a little faster. So I think there are folks looking at those kinds of technologies of how to shorten the transit time between Earth and Mars.
And so we've seen a lot of these risks that have been taken recently for astronauts that go up. And so somebody's asking, is there any way of allowing the astronauts on Earth the experience that changes their body may face in space? And again, this is kind of in the area of what we've seen with Year in Space and Christina Koch, and the kind of what we have with looking at the risks of what they're going through is it something that is important? Like, so is there anything from that you all learn from as you're working on next rovers, or things that you say, well, we want to add this piece to it to be able to research that? Is there any kind of connection to that and what you do?
I mean, I certainly can't speak to that as well. I think there are probably people who do, and I think there is a good amount of interaction. For example, I did and still continue to have conversations with some of the flight directors at Johnson Space Center, and we always try to trade. A lot of the things that I've learned from folks like that are how to better kind of leave a legacy when you transition onto a role, or how to train people, right? So, at this point, I'm no longer working Curiosity. There's a completely new, maybe a second or third generation of folks working there from when I last worked on it. And so how do you, like ensure that the things that you learn from, again, maybe from your mistakes, how do those kind of get passed along to the next generation of folks and the generation after that? So I certainly have had some of that interaction with the flight director team at the JSC, and being like, okay, how do you guys, when you train somebody new, how do you do that? And how do you make sure that what somebody learned from shuttle in 1987 still is being taught as a lesson today? So there's definitely parts of it, but I'm, as for technical stuff, I'm sure there are other parts of it that I not my area of expertise.
So to add this question to you, is there anything in particular that you've learned over the years that you wish you could share with people? Things you wish you knew earlier, risks you would have taken that, maybe a missed opportunity, or do those missed opportunities lead to the point that you are now? How do you kind of feel about that?
Man, I have no idea how I got to the point I am now. It still feels like just a lottery ticket. But no, I think that the main thing for me that I guess I wish I had thought or learned sooner is, I loved engineering, and I'm super happy that I got to be with a great set of people. The one thing that worked really well for me was treating my first few years as kind of an apprenticeship, and really just taking advantage of the fact that there are so many people in industry, and that I worked with directly, who were willing to spend time to kind of explain things to me, and give me the insight into why things worked the way they did, why we were making certain decisions. And I think people seem very, not people, but like it's easy to be hesitant and worry that you're invading on someone's time or taking up something. But I actually think most of us really love this industry and really want to share and want to see other people flourish and succeed. And I think, for a lot of young folks out there, I would encourage you, be respectful, of course, of people's time, but also, yeah, I mean, most of us want to, kind of get other people excited about it, because, we're talking about the shoulders of giants, but I see this as a long-term thing, right? I am working on my part today of the space kind of puzzle, but that story is going to continue for generations after me, and I want that story to succeed, right? I don't want to, I don't know, come back as a ghost in 100 years and be like, oh, we just stopped going to space. So, like I want to see like, oh, what's the next generation of folks going to do, right? And I think that's the beauty of, we're talking about InSight earlier, right? And Bruce Banner, who had worked for over 20 years on this idea of getting a seismograph to Mars. What an amazing, like what a perseverance in that story, right? Like what a story of getting there and doing and keep following up, right? And he is going to pass that on to the next generation of planetary scientists who is going to look at this on other worlds and maybe more on Mars. And I don't know, I love that that's really just it's a continuing story. So, but I would say, yeah, talk to the folks. People love. I love sharing the stories. I love our young engineers who I get to feel like I'm imparting some experience to, and explain all the dumb things that I did, and hopefully they won't make the same dumb mistakes that I've done in the past too.
And just one more question as we wrap up. That I love what you, Dr. Tanya Harris, and Serafina Nance. A lot of you are very personal with what you share on your social media. You, in particular, at Tweets Out Loud, Twitter, Instagram. Check out all the cool stuff that Bobak does. But you share a lot of personal stories there, and it can be with a platform of, I think you're at 125,000 just on Twitter alone. Sharing those personal stories connects with a lot of people, and it allows us to see how human the people are behind this. Because for so long we put scientists, astronauts, and stuff up on pedestals, but because of space Twitter in particular, we get to see that that vulnerability and that excitement and the things that you share with us. And I think you even had a funny tweet just yesterday. Hold on, let me find it real quick because it's that funny. Like I totally
cat.
Yeah, I don't think it's about. I think it's about the cats. It's yeah. So let me find it. I'm almost there. Oh wait. Oh, this is gonna kill me. Okay. Somebody had said. So you said 2023 bored. Bobak, what caused the anomaly on the spacecraft? Me. Well, you see, there's random bits of garbage text in the flight software code, like JNM apostrophe N. Bored. How did that happen? I'm sorry, comma N. Bored. How did that happen? We were all in lockdown, and the cats. They just kept sitting on our keyboards. And there's been an actual meeting about this, I understand, talking about cats possibly screwing up how the rovers are moving. But that's a funny one. But you share a lot of really personal things that allows people to connect to you. So do you feel any sort of risk in being that open and that vulnerable about what this is for you, or is it just something that that you need and want to share with your audience?
I haven't felt any risk, mostly because people have been so, I think, accepting or encouraging of it, which is nice. I think mostly for me, it's just showcasing that a lot of the feelings that I have and that others I maybe have as well are, genuine, that they're part of this. Like, again, I looked, when I started this thing, I was so intimidated by folks. And so I still suffer from a little bit of imposter syndrome. Every time I get a promotion, I'm just like,
Reach.
This time they're gonna catch me out. They're gonna figure out this time that I don't know what I'm talking about. But I want folks to realize that those are real feelings, and that if you're able to address those as kind of a little bit irrational, then hopefully it'll help you succeed more. For me, at the end of the day, it's a lot about hopefully just letting people feel a little less alone, or that that their feelings are not just unique to them. That even if you're reasonably successful or and having what seems like a very good career, that there's certainly going to be days that are stressful, and there's going to be days where you feel like you don't belong, and things like that. And I hope that again, people will find the energy and the in the camaraderie to stick with it and join us, because like I said, I love this industry, and I want to see all of us here enjoying and appreciating and experiencing this together.
And so something I just want to add here, talking about imposter syndrome that so many of us feel, is there's this wonderful story from Neil Gaiman where he had gone to an event. And so this is, I'm going to read it really fast because we got to go to the next panel. But here's how he tells the story. He says, "Some years ago, I was lucky enough to be invited to a gathering of great and good people, artists and scientists, writers and discoverers of things. And I felt that at any moment they would realize that I didn't qualify to be there among these people who had really done things. On my second or third night there, I was standing at the back of the hall while musical entertainment happened. And I started talking to a very nice, polite, elderly gentleman about several things, including our shared first name. And then he pointed to the hall of people and said words to the effect of, I just look at all these people and I think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things. I just went where I was sent. And I said, yes, but you were the first man on the moon. I think that counts for something. And I feel a bit better, because if Neil Armstrong felt like an imposter, maybe everyone did. Maybe there weren't any grown-ups, only people who had worked hard and also got lucky and were slightly out of their depth. All of us doing the best job we could, which is all we can really hope for." So couldn't think of a better way to end it than that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, this incredible conversation today. Again, man, I get to cross another one off my list. I hope that we get to do it again in the future
Yes,
with
please.
maybe a little more time. Yes, please. Thanks. Same to you, man. Thank you once again. Everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this panel. We've got another one coming up here in just a moment, so I hope you stick around. And now we're going to do the awkward 10-second pause as I end the stream.